and welcome back to Cheap and Green. Today I'm getting ready for back to school. So school starts on Tuesday and it's the weekend before, and I'm making a huge batch of granola. So this recipe I actually got from our local community center, but really they're very similar. Most of the recipes are pretty similar. I'll leave a copy of this at the end so you can download it if you like. So granola usually starts with rolled oats. You don't want the quick cooking oats, you want like the whole oats. And these are the big flakes, I prefer those. So I'm just measuring in 3 cups. And I put the measuring cup inside the bowl so I don't end up spilling all over the counter. Oops. So the next thing I need is actually chopped nuts. The recipe calls for 1 cup of almonds. I'm actually going to use walnuts and almonds combined, but I need them in a bit of a smaller chunk rather than these big whole nuts. So I'm just going to chop them up. This cutting board I find very slippery on my counter. So what I do is I just put a tea towel underneath and it's nice and stable. You could probably use a food processor for this too, but this is my favorite food processor right here. So the recipe calls for pumpkin seeds, but we're not that fond of pumpkin seeds, and we do like sunflower seeds, so I'm just going to substitute for that. The other thing is, if you have nut allergies and you're not allowed to bring nut products to school, then you could definitely take these nuts out, not put them in, and substitute more seeds like pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, even sesame seeds, whatever kind of seeds you like. That's easily substituted. And 1/2 cup of coconut. This is unsweetened coconut. And next I'm going to put in cinnamon. The recipe actually calls for cardamom, which I like, but my daughter's kind of meh about. So cinnamon is a crowd pleaser, and the recipe calls for 3/4 of a teaspoon of cardamom. For cinnamon, I think I'm going to do a full teaspoon. So just combine all this together. You don't have to be fancy about it, just so there's no big chunks of cinnamon all in one spot. There we go. So actually the recipe does call for salt, but since I accidentally bought salted sunflower seeds instead of the unsalted, I'm not going to put any salt in. I think it's going to be fine. So next is 1/4 cup of olive oil. You could use coconut oil if you wanted to. That's totally fine. I'm just using my 1 cup measure and eyeballing it. Granola is really forgiving. And I'll give you a tip. If you coat the inside of this with the olive oil and then dump it in, the next ingredient we're going to use is honey. And now the honey will not stick inside this container because it's got this layer of olive oil. So you'll need 1/4 cup of the honey as well. And again, I'm just eyeballing this in my 1 cup measure. We don't like it too sweet. And then here, I'll pour it this way so you can see. That's just going to come right out, and there's just like a little blob in the middle. Right? Much easier, and then I'll just scoop out this last teaspoon. Pretty easy. Lastly, a teaspoon of vanilla. This is optional. If you don't like vanilla or you don't want to use it, you don't have to put it in. This you have to stir pretty well because you want everything to be coated. Now you'll notice that the recipe also calls for dried cranberries. You could put raisins, you could put dried apricots chopped up, but you don't want to do that now because if you put them in the oven like that, they absolutely will burn and they become very nasty little hard chunks of like burned charcoal. Now we're just going to put this in a layer on a parchment lined baking sheet. Oh, I should say that I also have been preheating the oven to about 300 degrees. So I'm just going to kind of pat this down and even it out. Not going to be too fancy about it. There we go. And you want to bake this in the oven for about 30 minutes, and you'd want to stir it every, I don't know, every 10 minutes or so, because you want it to be evenly golden brown. And once it's achieved that color, then you take it right out. So put this in the oven for about 30 minutes. Stir it a few times to make sure that it gets evenly golden brown. So here's the granola out of the oven. You can see it's all nice and golden brown. But it's too hot to work with yet, so I'm going to let it cool for a little while before I add in the dried fruit. So now that this is all cooled down, I'm going to transfer it into an airtight container. And now I'm going to add in my dried fruit. I'm using dried cranberries. But if you prefer, you can use dried raisins or currants or chopped up dried apricots, whatever your preference is. So there you have it. So this is great just as it is. You can have it with milk, you can have it mixed with yogurt. It's even great on top of ice cream. One of the things I'm going to do for school lunches is I'm actually going to turn this basic granola into trail mix. So a little bit of granola and a little bit of semi-sweet mini chocolate chips and a couple of pieces of pretzel, and you can even throw in a few marshmallows. Joining me on today's Cheap and Green. If you're enjoying the show, then please subscribe and tell me what you think, and I'll see you next time.